Hello everyone, my name is Kate Drescher and I am going to be talking today about cochineal insects and their use as a natural food dye. I'm going to talk a little bit at first about who cochineal insects are and how their use is regulated under the law. As part of that, I will be talking about consumer awareness in labeling practices and the need for greater transparency. And then I will conclude with some thoughts about ethical considerations associated with the use of these animals and some non-legal remedies to protect these insects. Cochineal insects are scale insects. They are parasites who live on prickly pear cacti that are native to the southwestern U.S. as well as tropical regions of South America. Female insects and their eggs produce a substance called carminic acid. This discourages insect predators in the wild from consuming them, insects like ants, but due to its deep red color, it has been used as a food dye for centuries. When carminic acid is precipitated with aluminum calcium salts, the result is carmine. As a food colorant, carmine dates to pre-Columbian Latin America. Cochineal insects are traditionally harvested by brushing or picking them off of their host, after which they are either boiled or baked alive and dried in the sun before they're pulverized into a fine powder for further processing. It is estimated that approximately 70,000 insects are needed to make just 1 kilogram of this highly sought-after red dye. Historically, a food's color has been an indicator of its quality. And today, consumers want processed foods to have attractive colors with shades that, quote, are typical of their product variety, end quote. This means that consumers are looking to have ketchup be a very deep crimson red color, or lemonade to be a very bright yellow. According to the Center for Science in the Public Interest, carmine is found in a variety of foods like yogurts, candies, pastas, sauces, and soups, as well as beverages, although no insect body parts are in the final products themselves. While a variety of foods that Americans might see on the shelves of their grocery stores have been produced and colored using synthetic petroleum-based dyes due to the fact that they are less expensive to produce than natural dyes, manufacturers are now facing pressures, both from consumers and the government, to use natural food colorants, such as carmine. This is because it is believed that they are healthier, although in the research that I did for this project, the results appear to be mixed about those harmful effects. According to Chemical and Engineering News, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration banned the use of manufactured red dye number 3 in foods, effective 2027. And in an April 2025 press conference, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, along with leaders from the FDA, encouraged companies to remove all artificial colors from their food by the end of 2026. Carmine is among the most widely used natural food color dyes in North America and in Europe, along with caramel and beetroot. Although carmine is considered to be superior to beetroot, even though it is more expensive to produce because it has an excellent stability and a relatively high tinctorial strength. As with most species of insects, the U.S. law has failed to offer cochineal insects with any substantive legal protections at the state or federal level. However, this presentation will not focus on their welfare protections or lack thereof, but rather on how the Food and Drug Administration regulates the use of color additives in food under the authority of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act. The FDA classifies food colors as those that need to be certified, which are products that are typically synthetically produced, and those that are exempt from batch certification, which are dyes whose origin come from natural sources like vegetables, minerals, plants, and animals. Carmine and cochineal extract are listed on the FDA website as exempt from certification. It can be used in foods, however, labels must use the common or usual name of carmine or cochineal extract. However, prior to this revised requirement, the final rule was published in January of 2009, products containing carminic acid might have been listed on food labels using terms like natural red 4, crimson lake, carmine lake, and E120. The 2009 labeling ruling requirement by the FDA was in response to a petition from the Center for the Science in the Public Interest, secondary to, quote, reports of severe allergic reactions, including anaphylaxis, in a small number of people, to cochineal extract containing food and carmine containing food and cosmetics. This rule went into effect on January 5th of 2011. According to my research, carmine or cochineal extract is the only natural color additive that is exempt from FDA certification and at the same time is prohibited from being listed on labels using terminology such as artificial colors or artificial color added. Additionally, I could not find any other natural food dyes derived from any other species of insects that was regulated by the FDA. So, carmine is in a category of its own. The Fair Packaging and Labeling Act authorizes the FDA, along with the Federal Trade Commission, to issue regulations to help ensure that consumer products are labeled to prevent deception. While the FDA's 2009 revised rule for listing cochineal extract or carmine by name is a step in the right direction and consistent with this act, more must be done to prevent consumer confusion and deception. This FDA rule revision allows the small number of consumers with allergies to carmine to make informed decisions about purchasing and consuming products containing it. However, members of the general public, including those who may eat a vegan or vegetarian diet, who do not have food allergies, would have no real reason to know what carmine is and what its, quote, natural, end quote, origins are. The FDA, therefore, has expanded responsibilities to the general public related to the use of cochineal extract as a natural food colorant, and additional regulations that provide for greater transparency for all consumers is needed. Why is greater labeling specificity needed when listing carmine? Well, for a couple reasons. It's different from other food colorants, and then again, it's the only FDA-regulated dye derived from an insect, and the only natural dye that is exempted from certification, but has special labeling requirements. Federal legislative efforts such as H.R. 7974 that was proposed in 2024 was to amend the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act by requiring food products containing insects to be labeled. Unfortunately, the bill has not passed, but it is noteworthy because it provides evidence that Congress sees the need for greater transparency in food labeling when it comes to the use of insects. The Fair and Accurate Ingredient Representation on Labels Act is another act that would have authorized a different federal agency, which is the USDA, to regulate labeling standards for both cell-cultured and imitation meat and poultry products. If passed, the law would create standardized definitions to provide greater clarity on packaging labels. Again, while this act does not pertain to more precise labeling of natural dyes used in food products, it is another indication that Congress sees the need for accurate product representation in the name of consumer education. I would propose that the FDA needs to take things even a step further and require manufacturers who use carminic acid in their products to explicitly disclose through product labeling that cochineal insects are the natural source of that food colorant. It is the time for the FDA to do this now, given the current widespread use of carmine in many foods, the current administration's intent to phase out the use of artificial food dyes, and the fact that the FDA's rulemaking framework through the notice and comment process lends itself well to this kind of change in affording customers with information to make informed decisions. There's been some state-level legislation as well that is worth mentioning. And according to the National Agricultural Law Center, some U.S. states have proposed legislation pertaining to food law, including food and color additives. States such as Virginia, West Virginia, and California are seeking legislation or have already passed legislation that prohibits including synthetic food and color additives in foods. In conclusion, the FDA made new rules to regulate the labeling of carmine or cochineal extract to allow people with severe allergies to avoid purchasing foods containing the substance. This was an important revision, yet more needs to be done to create greater transparency for all consumers. This can be accomplished by the promulgation of a new rule or perhaps providing greater clarity to the existing labeling rule to state that carmine is a natural dye derived from insects. There is no reason to omit this information from the public. As I conclude, I wanted to just mention some ethical considerations in using cochineal insects. And the presentation that I just gave has focused on the need to establish a new rule. But beyond the ethical imperative to have transparency in food labeling practices, I don't think my presentation would be complete without at least touching on some of the ethical implications for using and exploiting these insects for human consumption. Here are a few. Female cochineal insects who have no natural defense from predators beyond their ability to excrete carminic acid are killed using barbaric methods that include burning and boiling. Cochineal insects are used and killed as food dye for the sole purpose of satisfying human preferences for vibrant colors in foods. Cochineal insect status as parasites makes it easier to see them in the other category and remove them from our moral circle. Despite their sentience, their value rests in their status as agricultural commodities, being things instead of beings. Billions upon billions of female insects are killed each year to make this food dye. And when we look at ethical considerations involving people, over the many centuries that cochineal insects have been harvested and used by humans, indigenous people have been exploited and continue to be exploited in the harvesting and production of carmine. There are some non-legal remedies also to protect cochineal insects from their use in food. I think humane education has a significant role to play for legislatures and the public to educate about not only insect sentience, but the role insects play in managing cacti population and serving as a food source for animals, the importance of being critical consumers by reading labels, and knowing what the term natural means and does not mean when applied to food products. I also think we can support the development of other economic opportunities for indigenous communities currently harvesting cochineal insects for red dye, and I believe that we can pursue sustainable plant-based dye alternatives that will yield the coveted crimson color. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation today. I welcome any and all feedback that you might have. On my last two slides are just the sources that I used for the presentation. Thank you.